just wanted to welcome you all and say huge congratulations. You are the best of the best marmalade makers in the world this year. Everyone here has won a gold award for their marmalade, and everyone here's marmalade was remarked upon by the judges as being extraordinary. We all sit in the room together, and often when one is picked out as being very good, it makes its way around the room. And there were some which were mostly empty by the end of the judging. So huge congratulations. Thank you for coming today to Dalmain. My name's Beatrice Hazel-McCosh. My mum, Jane, started the awards in 2005. Me and my brother have been running the awards for the last 2 years with her. So I'm very pleased to welcome you to Dalmain and come for the festival tomorrow if you're able to. We have a panel of very amazing experts for you this morning who are all going to do a kind of 2-second introduction of themselves. But I thought it would be useful to just go over what was going to be discussed. So if you have any burning questions, they might go under one of the headings. So we have what do you want, where are you going, branding, pricing, packaging, import and export, science, and how to fail. I don't know if anyone's seen listened to Elizabeth Day's podcast, but it's something that you did wrong but ended up being good in the end. So I think it's fascinating, and I think maybe you might too. So without further ado, welcome. I'll pass over to Dan.
Hello, my name's Dan Leppard. I'm a former head judge and chef and food writer and a passionate lover of marmalade.
And I'm Pam, or often known as Pam the Jam. I started judging here at Dalmain many years ago. Shortly after, I also had a jam company called Bursley Cottage, which is still in existence, but as I say, it's now in the jam lands of Essex and looked after by the Tiptree company, but it's still there. Been coming here and enjoy coming, and I just love looking at all the different marmalades.
Hello, I'm Alexander. So I'm the buyer at Gloucester, Teabay and Ken Lodge Services. So we're the Westmoreland family. I'm here because I'm the sort of retailer, so I'm not the expert. I'm a bit of jack of all trades buyer. I started at Harrods when I was finished A-levels, went as a Christmas temp, and I stayed 17 years. I just loved it so much. I loved all the food and meeting all the producers. And for me, it's the producers. You're the kings here.
Thanks, Alexander. Alexander, by the way, was my first. You were my first buyer, and he stayed my biggest buyer. So I had my name's Jane Maggs, by the way. I've been judging here for, I think, about 11 years. I'm now head judge, following on from Dan. This is my first year as head judge. So I had a preserves business, and I sold it just before COVID. But I like marmalade more and more as the years go on, which is a bit weird because we taste a lot, but I do. It fascinates me more and more.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Yumiko Taivas, and I have been introducing British culture to Japanese people for many, many, many years. But I love marmalade, and I have been making marmalade for I don't want to say how many years, but I just love marmalade, and I was lucky enough to judge this Dalmain Marmalade Award twice in the past, and then since then even more I like marmalade. So yes, that's it.
So if you guys share that Mike, if you just knock it off here when you're not using it. Okay, yeah. Then they won't compete. And so the first heading is what do you want and where are you going? Jane, would you like to start that one?
I will, but first of all, we'd just like to know a bit about who you are in terms of your business and where you are. So this is just with a show of hands, just so that we can see how big or small you are. The first question I thought of was, if you won and Fortnum & Mason placed an order with you for 700 jars of marmalade to be delivered next week, who would say, yes, no problem? And who would say, oh my God! So, can I just have a show of hands, just to see how...
Oh my God. Show of hands.
All right. Okay, the oh my God show of hands first. Quite right. And the no problem show of hands. Oh, okay. And then some undecideds or didn't understand. Okay, we could try... I think that probably gives us a fair idea. Because we don't know, obviously, when we're judging how large a company, a larger artisan business you are. Obviously, you're not going to be very big, because you wouldn't be artisan. But, yeah, we don't know. So we wanted to get a feel today of what size you are before, you know, to point the direction of travel, if you like. So the first category is what do you want and where are you going? So we're looking at production and whether you want to scale up and how to scale up. And thinking ahead, thinking about your recipes and whether you use small pans or whether you use larger electric pans. And balancing, I don't know about you, but I had my business in my house for probably nearly 20 years. The dining room was the packing shed, and in the end I just got really sick of having to clear up everything if we ever had anyone for dinner. So I don't know, is anybody else in that situation where... Yes. Okay, so how do you want to...
Next question, where do you make your marmalade? Are you going down questions?
The questions you did just...
You're doing your show of hands.
Okay, hang on. Yeah. So, okay, so the next question is, how many jars would you be selling a week, approximately? So who would sell less than 100 jars a week? Yep. Between 100 and 1,000? Okay. Over 1,000? Okay. Proper artisans. And where do you make your marmalade? So who makes it in their own kitchen at home? And who makes it in a workspace or unit? Okay. And who has their own factory? Nobody. Okay, this is good. We're all proper artisans. So, who's happy with the current size of their business? Who's happy? And who isn't? Who wants to be bigger or smaller? And who would like to grow their business? Okay. Does anyone currently export marmalade? Well, we know. Right? Kea does. And Hasco does.
Yes, yes.
We have two people who do. Yes, yes. Who would like to export marmalade? Okay. Okay. We are going to talk a bit about import-export. Actually, later on, Yumiko is going to talk about the Japanese situation. So, how to scale up? Who would like to?
I think, Pam, would you like to talk a little bit about scaling up?
Yeah, I mean to say, when we had Thursday Cottage, we would make 3,500 jars a day, but in small pans, hand poured, hand capped, and there's a lot to be said for actually still hand pouring, simply because if you actually have a filling machine, you actually have to, you always have to completely wash it down. So we had 14 burners cooking all day long. But it was really efficient. We could switch from raspberry jam to blackcurrant and likewise. So we actually, in a sense, we didn't scale up by using steam-jacketed cookers, which is another very good way of actually scaling up. But if you scale up, you've then actually got to actually scale up on your filling side as well. Because if you've got a big pan which has got, let's say, 50 kilograms of marmalade bubbling away, that's got to be then transferred into something suitable that you can pour from. So it can become a very costly business to scale up. Jane, how did you were small pan production?
We actually did a mixture. We had small pans and then we had one steam-jacketed machine, but everything was poured by hand.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It's an interesting thing. Often I know a lot of you work on your own, and I think one of the best ways to actually increase your speed is actually to have someone to help you. Often just help with the capping. You know, one of the most important things when we're making marmalade is getting it into that, you know, clean, sterile jar when it's hot. You need to get that lid on quickly, because otherwise you're going to, you know, certainly if you're working with reduced sugar jams, you've got to actually get that vacuum warm. So when I sort of see people, and to be perfectly honest, I often see on Instagram, you know, tables of jars without lids on, and I actually want to shout, quick, you know, get those lids on. We would actually line jars up, someone would pour, someone would cap, and it was, you know, hugely efficient. So often it may be, if you want to scale up to, you know, do it little by little, it's often best to employ someone. And certainly if you're doing marmalade, you know, you've got someone to help with your fruit production, your slicing of the fruit and doing things. So I don't know, Kay, do you cook by in small pans or big pans?
Sorry, my working part.
Small pans at first, but later become big pans.
Yeah, and Thursday Cottage has now, as I say, moved up to Essex, and they cook in steam-jacketed cookers, but actually not huge, you know, maybe 80 jars a pan, which may sound quite a lot to some of you, but in essence, in the scheme of the jam world, they're not huge quantities. Hand filling is always good because your fruit doesn't get squashed or bruised. So if you're wanting to keep, I know we're talking about really marmalade today, but if you're wanting to keep whole strawberries or gooseberries in your preserves, hand pouring is always the best way to do it. And also hand pouring is a great way you can, on quality control. You know, with Thursday Cottage, we used to buy in a lot of frozen fruit, and we had gooseberries, and one day there were some peas in the gooseberries, but because we were hand pouring, we could see them. So, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot to be said in sort of working in small pans.
So I just wanted to ask, ignorant point of view, but if you're scaling up, do you have to be careful of how your recipe does scale up? Because if you are making it in small batches, you think, oh, well, I just need to double or I need to triple. Surely that could be a reason why your marmalade is no longer that lovely stuff won the Gold Award.
Yeah, certainly if you're scaling up into a bigger pan with marmalades, you'd need to reduce the amount of water you're poaching with, because your surface area of your pan is, you know, you're not going to get that evaporation. So yeah, I do, and even I had an email from someone the other day whose marmalade hadn't worked, different fruit. I would always say, if you've got new fruit coming in, always do a small batch. Just to make sure fruit differs, you know, it always differs, you know, if it's dry or wet or whatever, pectin varies. So yeah, I think it's really important to actually test your fruit before you actually really step into a lot of production.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Anyone who has questions, please feel free to butt in.
And about the recipe, because I think all of us we don't use pectin and not citric acid, but I see that, for example, the double gold that go to Fortune, they have this, and I think it's because to be ensured that the jelly is correctly and about the drip and everything. you also did this difference when you
We, on some of our things, would always, we would add pectin to, and I don't mind putting pectin into things because it can probably mean I don't or wouldn't have to cook to such a high sugar content. But you probably have very fresh fruit.
yes.
And this is something we've often talked about, is that we import our fruit, it's in a warehouse, it then goes into a shop, it often sits around for quite a long time before people decide to make their marmalade, and the pectin will have actually deteriorated. And I often think of, we have a wonderful Australian marmalade maker, he's got a Seville orange marmalade in his garden, and I think it makes such a huge difference. And in that sense, your pectin's really great. And but I suppose we're looking at why the Seville is such a fantastic fruit, because it's got
But if you
pectin.
for example, you are obliged to freeze because we import also from Seville. In Portugal, you don't have anymore these orange. They are only for decorating the cities. That we have a lot, but still the jelly is fantastic. But I'm always afraid when I traveled with them by car, and you know, if they do like this and do like this, and it's not the same. So I think maybe we have to change a little bit the recipe to put this pectin that I am sure that in the shop, and also I saw, for example, in Corte Inglés in Portugal, if the shop is very, very hot, they have problems with the producer like us, that for the jellies is not good.
It's often, and this will come into packaging, often, yeah, I've had a jar of marmalade or jam that's fallen in the car, you look at it, you think it's all broken. It's often just pulled away from the jar.
Yes,
and
it's
if
true.
you open it,
Yes.
and it may have broken the pectin a little, and you get that syneresis, that wateriness, but it's all right. And I suppose it goes to, if you're packing and exporting, it needs to go into well-shrunk trays on a pallet,
Yes,
so that it
yes,
doesn't
yes.
get flopped around.
Can I ask?
Yes.
So just going back to what do you want and where are you going, Alex? Can I ask you a question about your experience of working with Harrods for their own brand production?
Yes, so it was a strange experience, quite honestly, because at the time, then I hope it has changed under new ownership, but at the time the brand was everything. The H on something was everything, and the branding, and that took precedence over the ingredients, I'm sorry to say. So because we required producers that were making for us to buy in the packaging and to hold the packaging, and that is something that does still happen. There's a local business here called the Toffee Shop, and if you go up into her loft, it's full of packaging, so that's all tied up. Her cash flow is tied up in packaging.
Can I interrupt for a second? Can we have a show of hands of anyone who does own brand production for anyone? Okay, so you have experience of it.
And as I say, so the brand really dominated the ingredients inside. So a lot of money was spent on the packaging, which meant there was probably less money to spend on the ingredients. And that is one reason I decided to leave. And then when I opened the farm shops at Tebay for the Dunnings family, we put the producer at the centre of everything. We didn't want to do own label, we wanted to put your label at the front. And now we do things which we started with Jane, and we were both a bit naive and it went a bit wrong, didn't it? So we thought it would be lovely to work in partnership. So I didn't want, in fact we didn't do own label marmalades because there was nothing I could bring to what Jane does already with her marmalades, but we did a small range of things, and we decided on Kilner jars because we thought that would be perfect. That's just so lovely. Gosh, it was a disaster. So how many Kilner jars did per batch were ruined?
At least 25%. And I've still got some of those Kilburn jars years and years later. It was the seals.
Well,
it was the seals.
They were afraid to say that Kilner jars were no longer as good as they should be. Once again, it was the Kilner brand. You can't trust it because they're all made in China, and the failure rate was appalling. So we learnt our lesson there.
Can I say something on that? Because really, a Kilner jar is meant for bocking fruit. It's not, you've got that big air space at the top. We had to make two products for National Trust in Kilner jars, and my heart, and I knew I needed to keep my sugar solids higher than I would want them to be to prevent any mould coming on. We didn't have a problem, but I often, when I see Kilner jars for jam use, unless you're actually putting them in a water bath, then yeah.
Sorry, I use a small Kilner jar from IKEA, the smallest one. No problem at all. The seals are perfect. And everything.
Do you put that in a water bath, or
no? I just I heat them in the oven, and put them through the dishwasher. Heat them in the oven. Put the seals in scalding boiling water. Then when I come to bottle it, then I quickly dry the seals, put it on, and they're all been perfect.
Well done, you.
So
yes.
and they're much cheaper than
yeah.
So the IKEA ones work. If anybody wants a Kilner jar, the IKEA ones work. I use the smallest ones. Don't use a bigger one. It makes a great package kind of thing. And so if anyone wants.
So that's interesting. I think this leads us on nicely to the branding and pricing and packaging element of things. Alexander, I think you might have something to say about the packaging and branding. Stacking of jars was something that we talked about as well. Stackable jars.
Yes, it is. When you've created your lovely marmalade, and I see there are some wonderful jars there, but as a retailer, those hexagonal jars, Jane, once again, they are so difficult for retailers to cope with, because what is the front of them? They all seem to turn round on the shelf and they don't quite stack, and then they all start a slight slide and fall off. So yes, as a retailer, I'm looking for products that do have sort of shelf presence and sort of do state their claim. And I think there's some good jars there. But that is the thing: is how much money do you spend on your jar, and how much obviously it's the content's the important thing. But when you're selling at a farmer's market, it's completely different. When it's into a retailer, into a shop, it's got to say everything about you on that jar. And I was taking me around, showing me some jars out there, and there was what's the name of the jars? The Unreal Marmalade.
Oh, the improper marmalade.
Improper,
There's the proper
yes,
and the improper
yes.
marmalade.
Improper
marmalade.
Yes, improper
Yeah,
marmalade.
double bold, yes.
And I hadn't appreciated, because I've seen those around a lot, but I suppose it's because of trying to avoid the sort of Mrs. Bridges sorts of things in the past, is that they don't say who you are. And I like personally to see the producer's story somewhere on the jar. But if I digress from what I was supposed to be saying, it was pricing as well.
Pricing, yeah.
Yes.
Because effectively your choice of top, for instance, it's a really impressive thing when I see artisans who have material tops. But gosh, that must take a long time.
Yes, and when it's on the shelf, obviously as a retailer you need to fill your shelf, because really when you come into the shop, everything should be faced forward, and you just get colours and stuff. And mop tops, obviously one jar on top of that, you don't really see the mop top, and they're just, for me, they just put that jar into the sort of gift shop. Sort of, for marmalade, I would really love to be surprised and delighted. I think because that's really what our customers want to be. We're on the motorway, so we are unique, but we are on the motorway, so most of the people coming to us are sort of bedraggled and worn out by travelling, and then they come in and they wake up when they see something. That's what you want. So try and imagine what your jar will be on that shelf, and gets your Gold Award label on the front rather than the top, because with the jars on top of each other, you're not going to see that wonderful award. Also, the labels are important. I see, that style of the sort of very clear label. We've ourselves do quite a lot of our own partnership ranges, as we call them now. We look very closely at textures and colours, and certainly people that have approached us in the past, I would advise them to get design help to put their ideas into practical ways, because sometimes people can love their products so much, and they've gone so way far down the road of creating a product, and they come to us and we go, oh dear, I'm sorry, just don't really like that. Have you considered this? Oh no, I haven't. Have you considered the barcode? Oh no, I haven't. And all those little things. So getting those things right and getting advice at the beginning, I think, is very important.
I would say also social media, website, general brand of yourself, and ability to package yourself, and press releases and things like that are important. Dan, can you talk a little about that?
Yes, just again a show of hands. Who has a website? Does anyone not have a website? Right, yes, a few. What about using social media like Instagram, Facebook?
And how many sales?
Yeah, and do you find you get direct sales from your website? Do you have like an online shop where people can buy it? Does anyone not? Right.
No.
And what else? And do you feel, a show of hands, who feels content with the way that their company looks outwards? Anyone? No one's content? Everyone's unhappy? Oh, a few people are happy. Good, a few people. Yeah. Well, no, it's fascinating too, because I think that, as Alexander was saying, that jars need a forward face. They need a front, and your company needs this forward face and front too. It's terribly important. It will affect whether you get small local buyers, or whether you even get export interest, will be by the appearance that people will judge about you. So do consider it. It doesn't mean you have to go out and spend £50,000. It can be just finding students and young people that can help you develop something. I mean, today, even with photography, I love to support good photography, but many people with their camera phones can take great pictures. So if you could show some of the shots of you making the marmalade, chopping and peeling, showing that it is a handmade product, that will go a long way to exciting people about what you do.
Can I just, in fact, the old Thursday Cottage border label that many of you may know was actually designed by a student, and that's probably, I hate to say it, nearly 50 years ago. And also it has its black and gold lid, which has become very consistent. That's my husband and I took the business on 35 years ago, and we went, oh, I don't like that black and gold lid, but we kept it. And it actually does stand out very well. When we sold to Tiptree, Smuckers in America wanted to sue Thursday Cottage because we were using a gingham design, and they thought it was theirs. If I'd had the business, I would have fought that case, but they didn't. They let it go, and if they export to America, they put a black lid on it.
Can I just say, because in this country we do like puns, don't we? So that's a proper marmalade I love, and also over there I don't know. was immediately taken by the one that was Dodger, which I know is Jammy Dodger. So I don't know whether there's a pun we can do on marmalade, but what I would like to see people offering me are marmalades which are really shouting that these are marmalades, really shouting about the fruit content, really shouting about them, what you were saying, because I loved one of the Japanese ones there. They had the picture of the ladies in the orchard, I think it was, picking the fruit and stuff, and I think that is getting that whole personality across, because in this country I do think we are rather stayed with the marmalades, maybe not with marmalades we're making, but that's certainly how we present them. For our business, we are all about locality. So at Gloucester, we have Gloucester producers, Cumbria producers in our Scottish site, Scottish producers. We are going to be opening a place near Manchester, so it'll be Cheshire, Manchester supporters, producers, sorry, not Manchester United supporters. Yes, a lot of those marmalades I see on the shelves are obviously very local. So, so that does. How does that translate into another place if you are thinking of selling it elsewhere? So, it is certainly something to consider.
Can I ask you just a question on that? And so, really, when you're talking about that labelling, often I look at a range and the company's name is big and strawberry jam or orange marmalade is little. You would prefer to see a nice picture and a nice name to say this is orange marmalade than actually having a big company name on it.
Yes, I think so. We last year an American lady came into our buying team, and I don't know why, but now we've got lots of peanut butters in our shelves, but there's been such invigoration of peanut butters, and there's really great branding out there, but great recipes and stuff. It'd be great to see somebody saying, I'm going to do what they've done with peanut butter, really, go for it, really, because, I think we're hiding our light under the bushel somewhat.
So, following on from the branding and pricing, part of knowing your own brand and your own identity, I think, is to then expand that. It doesn't have to just be marmalade. So this is a question for Dan and Pam about creating a cookbook. Talk a little bit about expanding the brand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to do a cookbook can be about using your marmalades, your preserves using your marmalades and your preserves inside of sweet baking, but possibly also savoury cooking as well. Now, Pam has a wonderful sort of preserve and cookbook. What do you think is important to a preserving book?
Oh, where do we start? My first book was with River Cottage, which was fabulous branding, and I do realise it has become many people's Bible. My second book, Pam the Jam, I feel I've put my soul into that, because in that book, I believe there's an awful lot of information that you will not find anywhere else, and it's because of my experience, and I've done it. Every recipe that's in there has been made many a time, and I understand things. And so where are we going on this one?
Expanding the brand.
Well, have I? I don't really think I have it. I've written the book, but
It turned into demos for you.
and actually a lot of people writing to me about all sorts of things, about all sorts of problems and things, and I'm always very happy to answer those things.
What about, would you advise people to put their marmalade recipes in a book? Because this is kind of
it's a sharing knowledge.
I think that's the job of Dalmain. I think we need a recipe book of all the winning marmalades, which would be, and we can all, look at a cookbook and take a recipe, and we all make it a little bit different. And we always say this is one of the wonders of marmalade. 100 jars, 100 people making marmalade, they'll probably all be a little bit different, cooking on different heats, different size pans. Some people cook it, 5 minutes longer, some less. So it's and I think actually I realise I'm sort of diverting from the question. But if you are in business, then you actually want to keep that consistency. For me, the most important thing is to have a refractometer and know what your pH is, so that you can get. Anyway, I'm sorry, but that sort of just led on.
If I could just ask, Kaya Jam from Taiwan, you have a cookbook that has marmalade recipes in it. Has that been helpful for your business? It's just a translation.
完整的、仔细的摊开出来，然后把所有秘方也拎出来，所以对于书的销售就有很大量的帮助。那也因为做了之后，你觉得这个这样的一个品质就风味非常好，所以它也可以创造了更这样的销售。
It certainly helps the selling of the books, and since this book is very much published, and the spreading of the book will also help the selling of the marmalade.
And so you're saying that by putting the recipes inside a book, it shows the qualities that you do. In a way, it acts as publicity to say, this is the way I make the marmalade that you buy. I think for many people aren't going to make marmalade. The reason they buy it is they don't want to go through all that work. They don't want to be struggling all the time. So don't fear it too much. Now, was it Jane? Did you have, when you were asking somebody about how they made their marmalade, wasn't there a story from one of the markets?
No,
that was you.
Yeah, I was in Hale Wine Market a week ago, and I have. Is it off? I've done it the wrong way. Sorry.
No, I think that's the right way.
That was the right way. Perhaps, that's better. And my husband said, "Oh, there's a savoury marmalade over there," so I went to try it, and I made a comment, and I said, "Oh, this is interesting. Do you use sweet oranges or several oranges?" And the answer came back to me, "Are you after my recipe or are you going to buy?" So I walked away. But in fact, just going back to that question, we're opposite here. I actually had the jam business and then wrote a book. So I'm not promoting a brand, essentially.
Can I?
Yeah.
I wanted to explain a little bit what happened to me. I began in 2013, and I remember because we loved a lot marmalades. And when we came to England for 30 years, we came a lot to Harrods, and we loved marmalades. That is quite difficult to find in Porto. In Porto, yes, because English was there for a long, long time. But and after the past, we did a lot of business in clothing, so it's coming for food to 20 years ago. And we had shops, gourmet shops, a lot of products, and marmalades never came. And afterwards, yes, I'm going to do, because we produce other things, I'm going to do marmalades. And it was so difficult to find a recipe in internet, a lot of American recipes, always with butter, with water with gas, and I was trying, and we have old recipes, very old books without no photos, and it was coming to put the shreds 7 days in the water, pulling the water out, it was really, really very difficult. And I found your recipe in Delmain. And you saved me, because I knew where to buy the orange in Seville, and I tried to do with mandarin. There it was difficult because no recipe viable of that, and this is very difficult to do. I saw Vivian Lloyd, but the recipe was always catch people that goes to these workshops, but they don't put recipe in the internet. I think they are not allowed to do it. So it was always about and it was very for people that don't have these habits in the country. So we have a lot of recipes of tomato, apricot, and everybody does that in Portugal. But for marmalade, it was really a tough job. To have a proper, a simple, and like this you can afterwards, now I'm putting a little bit of that without throwing away a lot of, it was always about the gelling point, the quantity of water, and it was, for us it was really important, for me, it was really important to have your recipe. And I think it was helping a lot.
And can I ask you, so in going forward, do you think in Portuguese you would put your recipe online so that other people, say in Brazil or around the world, could share your recipe?
Maybe settle more, because we have a lot of food products that are selling very well in big chains. Not marmalade, because also it's a very busy recipe and it's not easy, but I think I have to have more representative in a because we don't like too much to have giving our secrets before we are well settled, and afterwards I think I could do it, and maybe because the people that buys and a lot of friends. You teach me, so maybe now we could be doing a little bit this, because everybody know what is marmalade, a lot of people, but they don't have a clue how it's so busy and work inside a jar of marmalade.
I have to be cheeky and ask you, will you let your students put your recipe on the internet?
Not now.
Well, thank you for that.
Can I just say, as not somebody who doesn't make marmalade, but does try and follow recipes, because I've tried to follow yours and your carrot cake one I still use, but others I make such a mess of. I don't think you need to worry too much. But it does, sharing recipes does invigorate marmalade, doesn't it? It does inspire you, because the main thing about it, if I follow a recipe, I do it, but then I do it in my way, and that's the whole thing, is being confident in who you are, yes. And you just put your own personality on it, because in a way it's a stepping stone or leapfrogging, so you all get better, and then the marmalade that is offered to retailers, if that's what you want to do, then gets better. Yeah. So I think it's a good thing to share the love and knowledge.
Yes. There was even one very big British company during lockdown, Warburton's. They make crumpets, English crumpets, and they're renowned around Britain. And they put their recipe for crumpets online and said, just make them yourself, because they knew people will make them once or twice, but they're not going to set up a business. They'll buy Warburton's.
And also Tracklements, I expect a lot of the UK people know Tracklements, very successful with their savoury preserves. We used to like working alongside them. They've written a book about all their chutneys and pickles, and Guy said it won't matter, and it doesn't, because a lot of people won't want to sort of spend 3 hours cutting up onions for their marmalade.
I should say as well, we created a new category for the homemade awards this year, which is for prisons. And I wrote to a number of artisans to ask for recipes to send to the prisons if they wanted to have, something other than a Savelle marmalade. And all of those recipes that were made came back completely different to, I think one of the people who gave me a recipe was Sandy Higson, the Matt Jam woman, who I don't think is here. But yeah, I think the sharing of information and all of those prisons who made those recipes were incredibly grateful to have them. So we have 20 entries, which is amazing. You had a question?
No, I was just going to say that a recipe is all very well, but it's the technique that's important. Yes, and I think the more marmalade you make, the better you get at it, it doesn't almost matter about the recipe. So many things can go wrong. And it's about polishing the technique of getting the whole business of making marmalade right, because it's so easy to get it wrong.
Right.
I think that's a good one to lead on to with you, Jane. One of the things that was noticeable this year, Jane Maggs, who's taken over as head judge, is a scientist. So lots of her comments were very science. It's coming in later actually as one of the themes, but perhaps we can just touch on that now.
Yes, indeed. I think there is, I think if you know a bit about the chemistry of cooking, it does help you to understand actually what is going on in your pan at the time, particularly towards the end of cooking, where it won't happen here because you're all gold winners, so you won't be making mistakes, and a lot of entrants do. But one of the main problems is overcooking, passing the setting point. And obviously this starts further back when you're looking at your acidity. And Pam is a great believer in testing for acidity, which I would agree with. I mean, as this gentleman here was saying, as the years go on, you can do that. You don't need to use a pH taker. You know when you taste something whether you've got the right acidity or not. But when it goes past the setting point, it's very useful to know what chemical reactions are going to start happening, because it's no longer to do with making marmalade. It's to do with caramelizing, breaking down the molecules and new molecules being built. And you can end up with the bitter flavours, you can end up with all sorts of things which is different, entirely different chemistry to making marmalade. And it is really useful to know what is going on, because then you'll know whether you can, one of the things you know is whether you can restore what you've got or whether you've gone beyond help. And quite a few entrants, and none of you obviously, but quite a few entrants we have don't get that. They don't see that what they've made has gone beyond help. So I would urge you, I'm trying to think, there's an American gentleman written a massive book about the chemistry of cooking. McGee, yes, McGee on cooking. If you can ever get hold or read bits of a copy of McGee, it is really worthwhile doing. You'll think, well, there isn't anything about marmalade in here, but actually there is. It's a lot about sugars, and it is really worth reading if you can borrow or get hold of a copy. It's a thick book. It's an absolutely fascinating read, and it tells you all about how boiling temperatures, once you've gone past 104, what happens, and how, because you boiled all the water off, the temperature rises very, very quickly, and your sugar content rises very, very quickly. And we had a small marmalade competition last week for the start of Marmalade Week where I live, and it is very noticeable that a lot of the sugar contents were very high. And once you've done that, not only have you got a very sweet marmalade, you've wrecked the balance between the sugar, the bitterness and the acidity, which is what marmalade is about. It's that amazing balance. You've got so few ingredients, and it's getting that balance between the sugar. It's just a wonderful thing, I think. It is a magical thing, and as everyone said, everyone does it differently. But it is that balance, that magical balance is where you want to be. And the more you know about how that happens, the chemistry of how that happens, the more sure you'll be. And as this gentleman here was saying, the years go by and you instinctively know what you're doing. But the more you know about why it's happening, the better the results you'll get. It's a fact.
One of my mantras always is, and not to you, is that marmalade sets in the jar, not in the pan, because so many people just overcook.
Yes, indeed. And when you're expanding, this is one of the things that I found when This is on, isn't it? When I was expanding, was that people started asking me for. We used to supply quite a few people for cafes and restaurants who wanted marmalade in larger pots or larger plastic containers. And one of the things that tends to go by the board is you get busier and busier and busier, and you're sending the marmalades out quicker and quicker and quicker, and you're not giving them curing time in the pot. And I stopped making marmalades. I stopped pouring marmalades into 5-litre containers because we were so busy we couldn't let them cure. And I mean, a 5-litre container of homemade marmalade can take 2 weeks to cure in the middle of the container. And we didn't have that time. we were small like you, and we had to turn the stock over, and we did not have that time to have stock sitting on the shelf curing for 2 weeks. So I would only ever sell marmalades in 1.2 litre plastic containers to cafes and restaurants because I wanted to be sure that what was going out fitted the bill.
Can we have a show of hands for anyone who does do that? Just a couple of people. A show of hands for anyone who does sell their marmalade to shops or cafes to make other food with. A few people.
What size containers do you send yours out in?
It's not marmalade, it's I go on to strawberry jam in a plastic container, and I just said that I wouldn't do it in a plastic container or larger than my large jar because I didn't feel I would get the right set and it would be the right product for me to send out to them. So we didn't go with that, but the chutneys are fine like that.
Yeah. Would you expand if you worked out a way to do it?
Probably not. No, because it would then go back to I'd have to buy the packaging, I'd have to buy the jars or the tubs, and then if they decide they don't want to go with that, I'm then left with a whole load of plastic tubs and jars that I wouldn't be able to use otherwise. So no, it's just kind of like a standpoint.
I was going to say another problem with making those large pots is the bigger they are, the more you cut into your marmalade, the more you're breaking your pectin and you'll get a thin recess and a bleed in there. And so by the time you get to the bottom, it's going to be quite runny.
Jane Maggs, you've got a story about being left with a lot of packaging.
Yes, packaging. It's an issue because it's a very, as Alexander was saying, and everybody, it's a very expensive issue, as I'm sure you all know. And one lesson I learned fairly early on was that I was asked to make. It was an own brand. It was a big range, maybe even 20, 25 different products for a business who wanted their own labelling, and I agreed to fund the artwork for the labels. These were very colourful labels, lots of photography on them, and to buy the labels up front, and then they decided they didn't want to go with it. That was a huge expense, and I would never have made that mistake again. And
how do you not make that mistake again?
By saying no to people. I mean, you do have to say no. I mean, we were talking about this last night in our pre-meeting about supermarkets, for example, approaching you and saying, please supply us. And, you're always in two minds. The big deal is that if you start supplying a supermarket, what about all your valued customers who aren't supermarkets? So, I mean, I did say no, and I think you should say no, because you're artisan producers, and you will be sorely letting down people like Alexander. And people like Alexander are very, very wonderful people to have as clients, I can tell you, because he understands exactly what you're all doing. I wish there were more Alexanders in the world. If you can find if you can find a buyer who understands what you're doing, then hold on to them, because, and yeah, this business of supplying supermarkets, there's the idea that you're selling your soul down the river, but also, can you deliver? If you do decide to go, if a big client does ask you, like Fortnum's, can you make me 700 jars now? And you say yes. It's that business of, you don't want to say yes and let someone down. You're better saying no and delivering better, or than the other way around, because you don't get a second chance.
There's often a financial cost of not being able to deliver, you said.
Yeah, I mean, and then you do, when you're into clients like that, you are into all sorts of penalties. In fact, I think Yumiko's going to talk a bit about that. But you have to read the small print. You have to fully understand what you're letting yourself in for with a big commercial client, because the penalties for a broken jar, penalties for maybe missing labels or labels upside down are huge. There is no quarter given, and you can end up the costs you can incur far outweigh the benefits of the bulk supply. I don't know, has anybody had been approached by big clients and said yes? And have you had good or bad experiences?
Well, it was Fortnum's. A few years ago we won a double gold for a marmalade with beetroot. And they wanted... Can you hear me? Hello, that's it, yeah. Fortnum's ordered their first order was 500 jars of this double gold marmalade made with beetroot. And we duly delivered it to the Cambridge depot, and we actually packed it in, we were told we had to pack the marmalade in exactly the same boxes, same quantity of jars in every box. And we actually wrapped each jar in the Financial Times. We used the pink paper, thought it looked rather good. And we duly delivered it to Cambridge, and that was that. And 3 months later, they ordered some more. So we did exactly the same thing again, and wrapped it in the Financial Times, delivered it personally to the depot. And then a few days later, we got a phone call saying, you'll have to come back and pick up your marmalade because it's not packed properly. And we said, well, what's wrong with it? Well, you wrapped it in newspaper, and it will cost us money to unwrap it from the newspaper. So we said, well, we did exactly the same the first time and it wasn't an issue, so why is it an issue this time? And they said, well, it is, so you'll have to come and collect it. So we said, well, we will come and collect it, but we won't be bringing the marmalade back to you. And at that point, they changed their mind. And they said, don't worry, we'll sort it out. So there you are.
Because we deal with people who have then told us cautionary tales, but yes, one of the biggest penalties that you can be charged is their lost sales. So they will charge you the retail price of the sales they have lost because you haven't delivered on time, or they've had to reject. So yes, that is a cautionary tale, and be aware of that. But yes, as far as you do have to provide the marmalade jars in boxes that will stack on somebody's shelves. They do have to be labelled properly. As a business, we take on lots of people who don't have a barcode. We put our own barcode labels on. And if we're feeling really grumpy, we send them a sheet of barcode labels to stick on the jar before they send it in to us. Yeah. But yes, we're probably a bit too nice.
Alex, if someone says, yes, I'd really like to supply you, but I've only got 100 jars, is that okay?
I think if you're a retailer like we are, you would say, yes, that is great, because we want to have something which almost is special. It's not going to be around, but a lot of retailers, and now we're in a size of our business, you've got to imagine we're dealing with thousands of products on our system, and getting products set up on the system, it takes time, and it's a whole part of that administration. But yes, if you want to be retailer that's open to ideas and open to products, yes, you need to be able to take small runs, but don't expect it of everyone. And once again, sort of just picking on Jane, because now I can. We made a point of taking all of her marmalades and products, giving it a space, but staff in the shop used to get quite grumpy because there'd be a gap, because one of those lovely things still waiting for, and you know, as a shop you don't want gaps. So yes, you've got to, you know, as I say, I think we're quite mad trying to do what we do. So
it's having the courage and the knowledge to know when to say no. If you've said yes all the way up until this point, when to know to say yes or no. And also negotiation and at the opening of the conversation.
Yes,
if they want your product, it's okay to say, I'm panicking, I can't do 500.
Yes, and so really at the very beginning, you need to research, you know, the retailers you're looking at, and you need to work out your costs completely. I don't think sometimes people really do, because there's the transport nowadays, packaging, the outer boxes that we're talking about. That since Ukraine war and everything, it's also expensive. So quite understand that, but you've got all of those costs, and you need to have worked those out, because a retailer needs their margin. You've got to understand what a retailer margin needs to be. You know, our margin was around 36, it's now sort of creeping up to 38, but people mix up the markup with the margin. They come along to me and say, oh, I can give you, 32%, and they're talking about a markup, so the margin for me is 20 or something. So and if you're approaching people, is to understand they might want a bit of discount, and you've got to be very strong to say no, but I can offer you tastings, I can do this, and almost, you know, be strong about what you want, but certainly be upfront when people drop samples off with us, and they just drop samples off, no prices, nothing else. So, you know, it is obviously a business, and you've got to understand your business before you approach us.
One of the things we were talking about last night was the people you want to work with and the brands that align with your brand. So, for instance, if you make a very organic product, you want to align with someone who has those same values.
Yes, certainly. You know, that's why I would say research, because the products are precious to you. You've spent a lot of time on them. Do you really want them? No, I hate garden centres. I do hate garden centres, because they just have so much space, and they can just put absolute rubbish in. And we've been into some, and you think, I can say it because it's Marmalade Walker, next to the cheapest, nastiest bootlace confectionery. Why have Marmalade Walker sold their product to these people who are then going to stick it next to absolute rubbish? No, I think you need to be more discerning.
It all gets dusty, doesn't it? It all gets very dusty.
All gets dusty, neglected, and you know, your product's worth more than that. So be, you know, really research who you want to go to. I think.
Are there any questions about anything we've talked about? Anyone feel like they want to say anything?
I would say about garden centres as well, having tried it once, they do get very hot, as this lady was saying here. They do get hot, and that wrecks your stuff.
Well, yes, in saying that, we were doing nothing to do with Marmalade, but we were doing a cheese training course with the Guild Fine Food yesterday, and they were showing us different shops and stuff. And one of them was a shop where all the cheeses were in the window. You think that they probably thought, well, that's really good, that'll draw people in. There's nothing worse than cheese being hit by the sun, and we have it ourselves at Tebay North. Mr. Dunning is a very creative man and very strong about how he wants the shops to look. He put in this lovely light lantern in Tebay North as we were redeveloping it. Trouble is, the sun comes around, so that scorched earth of the sun, it wrecked so we had to then get it bleached out. So yeah, it's a shame when you see that happen.
Just going back to having the courage to say no, Dan, have you been in a situation where you've had the courage to say no to something?
Yes, often. I'm Australian. I don't know if anyone knows, and we say no a lot. Also, for Japanese people, I have a Japanese friend who married an English butcher chef, and I said to her, "What do you most enjoy about living in the United Kingdom?" And she said, "Saying no." I say no every day. It is something, though, that we have to practice. You have to practice saying no, and sometimes the result, you do get into conflicts. You do make people unhappy. But if you're coming from a good place, if you're not doing it out of hostility, and you really feel that you can't do this thing, the best thing to do is to say no. That is the most honest, the most, and it's really helpful for the companies, because you're setting boundaries and then they can work or not with them.
I think we might have a short break for 10 minutes if everyone needs to stop, do you think? And so it's 10:30 now. We start again at 11:15, and it will go on until midday. And